Part 59. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 582. Remember it in 1 second and read wonderful novels for free without pop-ups. Butler Zhang finally realized something, his face changed wildly, and he said in shock, your poison has been cured. The head of the Zhu family waved his hand and said, take it. Before Butler Zhang put down the flute, it was taken down by the Zhu family guards who rushed forward. He looked at the head of the Zhu family, suppressed the fear in his heart, and said sternly, Zhu, if you dare to betray us, the Xiao family will have your Zhu family exterminated. Take care of yourself first. The head of the Zhu family looked at him, with a cold look on his face, and said, in order to thank Butler Zhang for taking care of Zhu over the years, Zhu has prepared a big gift for you. After a while, Butler Zhang looked at a large pit in front of him, which was full of centipedes, spiders, venomous snakes, and other poisonous insects, and said in horror, what do you want to do, Mr. Zhu? The head of the Zhu family waved his hand, and the Zhu family guards pushed him directly into the pit, and then covered the pit with wooden boards. Let me out, let me out. Go away, don't bite me, don't bite me. Don't bite there, don't bite there. Listening to the screams coming from the pit, the head of the Zhu family showed an extremely happy expression on his face. Without the three major families to fear, it only took 1 day to clean up the Xiao family. In just 1 day, the Xiao family's business in Kuzhu was blocked by many parties and was divided up by 3 major families. As for everyone in the Xiao mansion, they were all arrested and imprisoned because of various crimes reported by the 3 major families. In this stronghold of the Xiao mansion, there are actually a few people who know the art of Gu, but they only know a little bit about it. They are incomparable to experts like Gong Sun Ying. She can control them all by herself without Lao Zheng's intervention. The Xiao family was cleaned up. When Tang Ning sent Chen Zhou to inventory the Xiao family's property, Gong Sun Ying had already grabbed a young man by the neck and asked in a sharp voice, where is the king of Gizhu? The young man looked confused and said, who is the king of Gizhu? I don't know. Gong Sun Ying tormented the servants captured from the Xiao family for a long time, but did not find out any information about King Qian. She couldn't find out anything with her methods. It seemed that they really didn't know. Chen Zhou left quickly and came back quickly. Tang Ning looked at him and asked in surprise, the inventory was completed so quickly. Chen Zhou said, Sir, the Xiao family does not have much property. The total amount of money found is only more than 30,000 taels. Tang Ning stood up from his chair. As the richest man in Kuzhu, the Xiao family was not surprised to find 3 million taels. 30,000 taels was not even a fraction of what he had expected. He looked at Chen Zhou and said, continue searching to see if there are any secret rooms in the Xiao mansion. Chen Zhou led people to continue the search. Tang Ning looked at one person and asked, who is the one who usually calls the shots in the Xiao mansion? The man looked frightened and said in a trembling voice, yes, it's Butler Zhang. Where is Guan Zhang's family? Going to Zhu mansion. In the Zhu mansion, the 3 heads of the Zhu, Huang, and Dong families looked at Tang Ning, and at the same time raised their hands and said, I have met Mr. Tang. Only more than 30,000 taels of silver were found from the Xiao family. Their work was in vain this time, which was not in line with his usual style of winning. Tang Ning looked at the 3 of them and asked, I heard that the Xiao family's business has been divided among the 3 of you. The head of the Huang family looked at him and immediately said, the Xiao family intends to rebel and has committed a heinous crime. The Xiao family's property will naturally belong to the treasury. Don't worry, sir, we will convert all their property into silver and send it to the inn. Tang Ning nodded and said, that's very good. The head of the Huang family has obviously grown up in the past 2 days. He wants Zhu's family's industry and business to be useless. For Chen Huang, the industry and business are not as exciting as free money. The head of the Zhu family looked at him, cupped his hands and said, "I wonder what important business Master Tang has here." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "I heard that the Xiao family has a butler here." The head of the Zhu family was startled when he heard this, then looked back and said, "Bring him up." When the housekeeper of the Xiao mansion was brought in by two housekeepers, even Tang Ning was shocked. His whole body was black and purple, and his body was covered with bloody holes. There was a 3-inch long centipede hanging from his hair, and he lay limply on the ground, motionless. Tang Ning looked at the head of the Zhu family and asked, "Dead?" "Don't worry, sir. Those poisonous insects have all had their fangs removed and they won't die." The head of the Zhu family looked at a servant behind him and said, "Wake him up." The servant poured a ladle of cold water on Butler Zhang's face. After being shocked by the cold water, Butler Zhang finally woke up. He trembled and immediately hissed, "Don't come over, don't bite me." The servants of the Zhu family poured another ladle of cold water on it. Butler Zhang was stunned on the spot, obviously not having recovered yet. The head of the Zhu family looked at him and said, "Master Tang asked you a few questions, and you must answer them truthfully." Butler Zhang looked over blankly. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Where is the Xiao family's money hidden?" Butler Zhang said in a daze, "No, I didn't hide it." How could the Xiao family, as the richest family in Kuzhu, only have 30,000 taels of silver? Tang Ning looked at the head of the Zhu family and said, "How about you help me ask?" Butler Zhang looked at the head of the Zhu family, his body couldn't help but tremble, and his voice was crying, and he trembled, "It's really not true. All the money earned by the Xiao family has been shipped to Runzhou. There really is nothing here." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Is the king of Kuzhu in Runzhou?" Butler Zhang looked up at him, a trace of surprise appeared on his face, and the next moment he said, I don't know what King Qian is." Tang Ning looked at the head of the Zhu family again and said, "How about?" Butler Zhang trembled and immediately said, "Yes, King Qian and the prince are in Runzhou, and the priests are also in Runzhou." Tang Ning asked again, "Do you know Bai Jin?" "Prince Bai used to be active in the capital, and he came to Jiangnan a few days ago." "Where is Su Mei?" "Miss Su is the apprentice of Prince Bai, with unparalleled beauty. Many people like her, even the prince is no exception. It is unknown how much inhuman torture this Butler Zhang has just experienced." Tang Ning asked one question, he answered 2 sentences, and he told everything like a bamboo tube pouring beans. What he said was not much different from Tang Ning's guess, but just confirmed his guess and made a certain clue clearer. He looked at Butler Zhang and finally asked, "What is the plan of the king of Qian?" Butler Zhang said, "No, the king of Qian has no plan." Tang Ning looked aside and said, "Master Zhu." Butler Zhang collapsed and cried, "The king of Qian really has no plan. The king of Qian is dead. How can a dead person have a plan?" Tang Ning was stunned and asked in disbelief, "The king of Qian is dead?" Butler Zhang looked at him and said, "A few months ago, His Royal Highness the King of Qian died of illness in Runzhou. I am telling the truth. Believe me, believe me." Tang Ning did not doubt the truth of Butler Zhang's words, because Bai Jin left too hastily, as if someone in her family had died. The fact is that someone in her family really died. The King of Qian is Bai Jin's master and the most important part of her plan to restore the country. She has been planning for many years. Any step can be missing, but the King of Qian cannot be missing. Now that the King of Qian is dead, what can she do even if she restores the country? She can't become the emperor herself, right? Life is unpredictable, and the King of Qian still has no destiny to be the emperor. Looking at it from another angle, Bai Jin's mission failed, and Su Mei's kindness to her was repaid. From now on, they will go their separate ways. Isn't it happy? However, this is a bargain for Gong Sun Ying. Bai Jin and Gong Sun Ying each serve their own masters, and their goal is to restore the country. Now that Baijin's master is dead, Gong Sunying and the king of Wu, to whom she is loyal, have won the biggest opponent without doing anything. Tang Ning had just returned to the post station when Gong Sunying came out of the room and said, "There is another housekeeper of the Xiao family in the Zhu mansion. If we find him, we will definitely get more information." Tang Ning said, "I have been to the Zhu family." Gong Sunying looked at him and asked, "Did you find out the whereabouts of the silver?" Tang Ning said, "All the silver in the Xiao mansion was transported to the king of Qian. It is normal that there is no silver here." Gong Sunying thought for a while and said, "I will ask again. Maybe there is some missing information." "Don't you just want to know where the king of Qian is?" Tang Ning waved his hand and said, "No need to ask. The king of Qian is dead." Gong Sunying was stunned and said in disbelief, "Qian, the king of Qian is dead? He died of illness a few months ago." Tang Ning looked at her and said, "Baijin hurried to Jiangnan just for this matter." After Gong Sunying came to his senses, his face changed several times and the muscles on his face began to twitch. Tang Ning glanced at her and said, "Laugh if you want to. You're almost getting crow's feet. Ha 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 ha." Old Zheng was sharpening a knife in the yard when he was suddenly startled by the woman's laughter outside. He shuddered and broke the whetstone in half. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 583. The text of Ruyi Xiaolang Jun. Chapter 580. Furious Tang Ning was frightened by Gong Sunying's sudden laughter and almost fell down the stairs and sprained her ankle. Old Zheng came out, looked at Gong Sunying who was laughing wildly, and asked Tang Ning, "Is she crazy?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "Almost. More than 10 years of planning and hard work, running around, is not it for the future of King Wu to inherit the throne, and the biggest stumbling block in front of King Wu is King Qian. Now, before they can make a move, King Qian has been taken away by God. King Wu has no rivals in the world." Under the ups and downs, she did not go crazy with joy like Fan Jian, which was already very restrained. After learning about the death of King Qian, Gong Sunying's suppressed mood along the way was obviously swept away. Tang Ning had never seen this woman laugh before, but today alone, she suddenly laughed 3 times. The heads of the 3 major families also looked very happy. The business of the Xiao family was taken over by them and divided up cleanly. Even if they still have to pay a lot of silver to the court, they can earn back all the principal and interest in a few years. The Xiao family's property in Kuzhu is initially valued at 5 million taels. The 3 major families have already collected 5 million taels 2 days ago. In a short period of time, they cannot take out so much cash. Tang Ning relaxed the conditions for them. If there is no gold and silver, silver notes will do. If it really doesn't work, it is not impossible to use any valuable things as collateral. In this way, their gains in Kuzhu will be as much as 10 million taels, which is equivalent to the tax silver of the national treasury for 1 year. These Jiangnan nobles are really rich. Zhu, Huang, and Dong can cover the sky with one hand in Kuzhu, but looking at the whole Jiangnan, they are not the top. The wealth of the corrupt Hessian is equivalent to the tax revenue of the Qing dynasty for more than 10 years. Although the wealth of these Jiangnan nobles is not so exaggerated, if more than a dozen states do this, at least for more than 10 years, Chen will no longer have to worry about the problem of tight treasury. Zhang, the steward of Xiao's house, finally gave out some information. The king of Qian had 3 bases in Jiangnan, such as Kuzhu, for collecting money. The largest one was in Runzhou. In addition to the Xiao's house in Kuzhu that was taken down by Tang Ning, the other 2 were located in Wuzhu and Shezhou, just on the way from Kuzhu to Runzhou. It's a pity that all the silver earned by the Xiao's house in these 3 states in recent years was transported to Runzhou. Kuzhu only had 30,000 taels, and the other 2 states should not be much different. Whether they have silver or not, the base of the king of Qian should be taken down. After all, at this point, the goal of their trip was very clear. The king of Qian was dead, but the remnants of the king of Qian were still there. In addition to Kuzhu, there were also some signs of rebellion in Runzhou and other places. If they were ignored, others would think that he came to Jiangnan just to make money, and that he was a vulgar man who was obsessed with money, which would damage his tall and majestic image in the hearts of officials in Beijing. It was Emperor Chen who was obsessed with money, and he would not take the blame. The matter in Kuzhu has been settled, and the three major families and the local government have reached an agreement. If the Xiao family sends someone again, it will only come back. Since Kuzhu is stable, Tang Ning has no need to stay in the state for a long time. He bids farewell to Su Qingyang, Zhang Yanzheng and others in Kuzhu and is about to go to Wuzhou, moving towards the final goal of Runzhou. Runzhou, Xiao Mansion. The Xiao family is a new family in Runzhou. It has only been prosperous for a short period of 10 years. From the foundation, it is far from comparable to the four major families in Runzhou. Runzhou is located in the hub of Jiangnan, and its wealth is not comparable to other states. The four major families in Runzhou are also among the top in the whole Jiangnan. Any one of them is not only the overlord of Jiangnan, but also has the ability to reach the sky and the earth in the court. The four major families have a deep foundation and firmly control Runzhou, but the Xiao family has taken a piece of its own territory from the four major families in the past 10 years and has become one of the top wealthy families in Jiangnan, making the four major families quite wary. Just for this reason, the Xiao family cannot be underestimated. Runzhou has been a little turbulent in the past few months. The death of the master of the emerging wealthy family Xiao family will cause some turmoil in Runzhou anyway. The four major families will naturally not miss this opportunity. They took advantage of the chaos in the Xiao mansion and took a lot of advantage of the Xiao family. It was not until the young master of the Xiao family stood up that the four major families restrained themselves. Inside the Xiao mansion, a young man put down his teacup heavily and said angrily, "The Su family is very skilled at taking advantage of the situation. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't have suffered such a big loss this time. It's better not to have these petty gains." Bai Jin stood beside him and said, "The Su family dominates Jiangnan, and they are not so easy to mess with. They also have the Tang family and Prince Duan in the court. It's not worth going against them for a little money." The young man looked at him and raised his eyebrows and said, "Haven't you been developing in the capital for these years? How come you can't even deal with the Tang family?" Bai Jin explained, "The Tang family has many followers, and there are Prince Duan and concubine Tang Hui above them. No one in the court can deal with them now." "All right," the young man waved his hand and said impatiently, "I know that my father has no use for you. If you want to plan big things, you still have to rely on this prince himself." Bai Jin opened his lips, but didn't say anything in the end. The young man thought of something and suddenly asked, "The silver from Kuzhu should be delivered soon, right?" As soon as he finished speaking, a man walked in from outside and said, "Prince, there is news from Kuzhu." The young man looked at him and asked, "How much silver did Zhang Shun send this time?" The man looked at him and said, "Prince, something bad has happened. The Xiao family of Kuzhu has been raided by the government." "What?" The young man stood up and said angrily, "Why was it raided by the government? What about the three major families? What do they do?" The servant said, "Prince, there are three major families involved in this matter. The three major families are afraid of betraying us." Looking for death, the young man slapped the table with his palm, and the table suddenly broke into pieces and collapsed. The Xiao family of Kuzhu is their place to make money. Now that the cause of restoring the country has reached a critical moment, it is the time when money is needed. How can it go wrong? "Send someone to check it out," the young man said in a sinister voice. "If the three major families really betrayed, you might as well help them replace an obedient head of the family." "Yes," the servant responded and immediately retreated. The Xiao family has controlled the three major families for many years. It can be said that the three major families in Kuzhu are their captive livestock. The livestock have been suppressed for too long and want to be the master. At this time, as long as a few of them are killed in front of them, they can become quiet again. Kuzhu. Baijin seemed to have thought of something, and his face changed slightly. Sumei was wearing a thin shirt, lying on the bed, swinging her legs with her legs raised. When she saw Baijin coming in, she looked up and asked, "You look bad. Were you scolded by the prince again?" Baijin glanced at her and said, "The three major families betrayed, and the Xiao family in Kuzhu was confiscated by the government." Sumei rolled her eyes at her and said, "You also said that witchcraft is a crooked way to control people. People who often use crooked ways are likely to suffer retribution." Baijin said, "The three major families don't have the courage. This must be done by the officials from the Ministry of Personnel." Sumei glanced at her and said, "Why are you telling me this? Does this matter have anything to do with me?" Baijin looked at her and asked, "How long have you not read the intelligence?" "I haven't read it since I came to Jiangnan." Sumei put down her legs and said, "What's wrong?" Baijin asked, "Do you know who the Ministry of Personnel sent to Jiangnan this time?" Sumei seemed to have thought of something, her face changed, she sat up from the bed and asked, "Who?" "You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 584. Chapter 581 of the main volume of the Ruyi Young Master. Baijin jumped out of the window and looked at Sumei, and said, "Tang Ning, Acting Minister of the Ministry of Personnel." Sumei stood up, looked at Baijin, suddenly smiled, and said, "You deceived me." "You know whether I deceived you or not." Baijin glanced at her and said calmly, "As soon as he arrived at Jiangnan West Road, he arrested several officials, including the governor of Ezhu, and jailed them, and escorted them to the capital within a month, stirred up chaos in Jiangnan West Road, and raided our stronghold in Kuzhu when we arrived at the first state in Jiangnan East Road. Who else could do such a thing besides him?" After Baijin finished speaking, he threw a few pieces of paper on the table and said, "Read it yourself." Sumei picked it up and looked at it, then put it back and said with a smile, "It's good that he's here. I can sleep peacefully again." "I hope that's all." Baijin looked at her and said, "You'd better tell him not to interfere in our affairs." Sumei's eyes flickered and she said, "You can tell him yourself." Thinking of Tang Ning, Baijin showed a hint of fear on his face and said, "I don't want to conflict with him, and I believe you won't either. As long as he doesn't interfere in our affairs, I will advise the prince not to be an enemy of him." After saying that, she turned around and walked out. After Baijin walked out, Sumei put away the cynicism on her face and turned to a trace of worry. At the same time, Jiangnan West Road, Yuanzhou. As soon as the caravan from the capital entered Yuanzhou city, a steward walked onto the street, stopped several passers-by, and asked eagerly. After a while, he came back, walked to a carriage, and said, "Miss, I have inquired, Mr. Tang left Yuanzhou more than 10 days ago. He's gone again." A look of disappointment appeared on the woman's face. She jumped off the carriage and said, "You guys stay here for now, I'll go alone." The steward hurriedly stopped her and said, "Miss, you can't. Before leaving, the shopkeeper specifically told you not to let you go alone. Besides, you don't know where my uncle has gone." The woman's face showed an annoyed look, and she complained, "You are so slow, how long will it take?" Tang Ning stood under the city wall, looking at Runzhou city, and then at the bustling crowd at the city gate, and determined that the economic center of Chen State's Jiangnan seemed to have moved to Runzhou. No wonder several big families from the south of the Yangtze River have established themselves in Runzhou. The king of Gizhu also chose this place to hide in the past. As long as Runzo is captured, his money bag will be enriched quickly. After determining that the target was Runzo, Tang Ning did not plan to go to other state capitals in Jiangnan East Road in person, but handed over the task to other junior officials in the Ministry of Personnel. Anyway, he came to put down the rebellion. In the process, he also took over the strongholds of King Qian in Shezhou and Wuzhou. Runzo was the last stop. If he guessed correctly, Su Mei is in Runzo now, most likely in the Xiao mansion. However, Tang Ning couldn't go to see her. He had taken over 3 of their strongholds, and there was a high chance that King Qian's people wouldn't welcome him. If he went to the Xiao family, it would cause unnecessary trouble. He needs to go to the city defense camp in Runzo first. Runzo is an important economic town in the south of the Yangtze River. There are thousands of troops stationed in it. Safety is the most important thing when going out. They have already hit the enemy's lair. If they don't mobilize thousands of soldiers and horses, they will have to sleep. Not at ease. Even if officials taking the Ministry of Civil Service exams entered the city without prior notice, the guards at the city gate informed the local officials of Runzo immediately after learning of their identities. When the governor of Runzo led Runzo officials to the inn in a hurry, some people also got the news. Su Mansion. The 4 major wealthy families in Runzo, headed by the Su family, are not only because of the Su family's strong financial resources and influence in the south of the Yangtze River, but also because of the in-law relationship between the Su family and the Tang family of the capital. The Su family also has a strong background in the court. If the king can ascend to the throne, the Su family will become the legitimate first family in Jiangnan. A servant hurriedly ran into the Su family, ran to a certain hall, looked at an elegant man, calmed down and said, "Master, he is here." A person opposite the elegant man looked at him and asked, "Brother Su, who is here?" The elegant man put down his teacup, smiled and said, "An interesting young man came to Jiangnan this time for something. I wrote from home asking the Su family to take good care of him." The man looked at him and said, "If Brother Su can rate it as interesting, then it's really interesting. When will you recommend me?" The elegant man smiled and said, "Let's wait until we have the opportunity. There are still some things in the house, so I won't stay any longer." The middle-aged man stood up, looked at him, and said, "Brother Su, remember to think about what I just said." The elegant man nodded and said, "Definitely." When the middle-aged man walked out of the Xiao mansion, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth and he murmured, "I wonder if this Shangfang sword will be able to defeat the Su family." In the Su mansion, the expression on the elegant man's face was not as indifferent as before. He tapped the table with his index finger and said slowly, "Why did he come to Runzo?" The officials who took the Ministry of Civil Service examination entered Runzo. On the surface, there was no splash, but secretly there was a lot of turbulence. In the Xiao mansion, Prince Jian grabbed someone by the collar and said angrily, "What are you talking about?" The Xiao family in Shezhou and Wuzhou were also raided by the government. The steward trembled and said, Hui Shizi, this time the civil service examination in Jiangnan is very strict. Businessmen from various states who have tax problems have mostly been fined silver, and some have had their homes confiscated." The Crown Prince of Gizhu didn't listen to his explanation, pushed him away, and said gloomily, "No matter who it is, whoever dares to ruin my important affairs will stay in Jiangnan forever." Bai Jin's expression changed, and he took a step forward and said, "Your Majesty, please calm down. All the silver from Kuzhu, Shezhou, and Wuzhou has been transported to Runzo. Now that the Crown Prince has decided to start an uprising, these 3 places will not be of much use in the future. It wouldn't be a pity to investigate, but this person, the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Civil Affairs, has many tricks. It is really unwise to actively antagonize him." The Crown Prince of Gizhu looked at her and said, "You have been in the capital for so long, but your courage is getting weaker and weaker. This is Jiangnan, this is Runzhou. I, the crown prince, can't do anything to the four major families. How can I defeat a small one like him? Isn't there anything the Beijing officials can do? Bai Jin's expression changed again. Your Majesty. Shut up, Prince Jian waved his hand and said, as long as he dares to come to Runzhou, I will let him never come back. It was late at night, and inside the inn, Tang Ning was looking at the information about Runzhou that she had collected before, while Chen Zhou was making the bed in the house. With Chen Zhou on the strip, he not only had an extra personal guard, but also a servant girl. Of course, Tang Ning had never ordered him around before, and he did all these things on his own initiative. He walked to the window, checked it, and found that one window was not closed. When he was about to close it, Tang Ning stood up and said, "There is no need to close that window." Chen Zhou was stunned for a moment, then nodded. Tang Ning looked at him and said, "It's getting late, so you should go back and rest early." Chen Zhou cupped his hands and said, "I'm resigning." After Chen Zhou left, Tang Ning simply washed up, turned off the lights, and got into bed with her clothes on. Not long after, a soft squeak sound came from the window of the room, and Tang Ning smelled a familiar fragrance in her nose. Afterwards, there was a warm body under his quilt. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 585. Ruyi Xiaolang Jun Text Volume 582 Chapter 582, Make a Fortune? The women Tang Ning knows all have their own strengths. Xiao I can write poems and lyrics, Xiru is good at needlework, Li Tianlan has a strategy for governing the country, and Zhao Man is coquettish, and her two whimpers can make people's bones soft. In addition, the third wife Tang Yao Yao is good at climbing over the wall, and the sister Suhuli is good at jumping out of the window, but the only one who can sneak into the bed in the middle of the night is Sumei. Tang Ning put his hands behind his head and said, "Long time no see." Sumei took a deep breath, her bright eyes flashing in the dark night, and said, "Long time no sleep." Tang Ning moved to the inside of the bed and kept a distance from her in the quilt. The most beautiful woman in the capital, the thoughtful and considerate intellectual sister suddenly turned into a slut who spoke dirty words. When she was in the same bed with her, her words were like blowing in her ear. Who could stand it? When sleeping with Tang Yao Yao, the green apple, he could still keep his mind pure and desireless. Facing the ripe Sumei, he could only use distance to restrain some thoughts that should not arise. "Why are you hiding?" Sumei leaned inward and said, "Am I so scary? Or have you felt alienated after not sleeping for a long time?" Tang Ning leaned sideways, looked at her and asked, "The king of Qian is dead, what are you still doing in Jiangnan?" Sumei's body trembled and asked in surprise, "How do you know about the king of Qian?" Tang Ning said, "I know everything about you." Sumei asked, "Master uncle told you?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "He told me everything." Sumei said in disbelief, "Impossible, how could she tell you such a confidential thing?" Tang Ning certainly couldn't tell Sumei that Gong Sunying was so honest because he threatened her that he would kill her if she didn't tell him. He said casually, "Maybe she was moved by my sincerity." Sumei stopped asking about this matter, thought about it, and asked, "Why did you come to Jiangnan? Is it because of the matter of the king of Qian?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "The court has noticed Jiangnan. If you make more noise, it will not be me who comes to Jiangnan, but the army of the court." Sumei was silent for a while, looked at him and said, "Can you promise me one thing?" Tang Ning said, "Go ahead." Sumei said, "Can you not interfere in the affairs of Jiangnan?" Tang Ning looked at her and asked in confusion, "The king of Qian is dead, Bai Jin still won't give up." "The king of Qian is dead, and there is still the prince," Sumei explained. "They have been operating in Jiangnan for many years, just for the cause of restoring the country, and they will not give up easily. There are also many tributes around the prince. You can't beat them in Runzo. Tang Ning didn't expect that when the old died, there would still be the young, and the son would inherit the father's business. Now Gong Sunying was happy in vain. He shook his head and said, "It's not me who is fighting them, it's the court that is fighting them. Can they defeat the court?" "Of course they can." Su Mei raised her head and asked, "What if the grassland and the western regions are added?" Tang Ning sat up from the bed. Su Mei's words just now contained a lot of information, and he had to digest it. The grassland alone is already a great enemy of the Chen kingdom, and once the western regions enter the interior, it will immediately become a threat that is no less than the grassland. At that time, the Chen kingdom must divide its troops into two groups, one to resist the grassland and the other to resist the western regions. In this case, if Jiangnan stabs the Chen kingdom in the back again, the old Zhao family's rule may really come to an end. He turned to look at Su Mei and asked, "Has he united the grassland and the western regions?" Su Mei said, "We haven't reached an agreement yet, but they have already contacted people from the grassland and the western regions. If you hinder him, you will be against three forces at the same time. In this way, the four major forces will not tolerate you." Tang Ning was surprised and said, "Why did it become the four major forces again?" Su Mei pinched her chin and said, "The Su family in Runzhou is a relative of the Tang family in the capital. They should have known about your arrival in Runzhou. Do you think they will let you go?" Tang Ning was helpless as he entered the den of thieves without knowing it. He didn't need to worry about the people in the grassland and the western regions. This was not their territory. They couldn't cause much trouble. The Su family was just a powerful family. If Tang Ning didn't intend to reason with them, he could find a suitable reason to sacrifice them to contribute to the national treasury. As for the Prince of Qian, it might be a little more troublesome, but it was just trouble. This is not the point. The point is that they actually hooked up with the grassland and the western regions. If these three parties really reached an agreement and attacked at the same time, the situation would be really serious. Chen Chu could still handle the grassland alone, but if the western regions were added, Chen would immediately be unable to cope with it. At this time, if there was chaos in Jiangnan, it would most likely be the last straw that broke the camel's back for the yak. Chen must not have any trouble. If Chen had any trouble, what would happen to Xiao Ru and Xiao Yi, his father-in-law and mother-in-law, and their family's business? Tang Ning couldn't watch this happen, both publicly and privately. He looked at Su Mei and asked, "If I fight with the Prince of Qian, who will you help?" "You have no conscience, you doubt me." Su Mei twisted his ears and said angrily, "When you were in trouble, who made an exception to help you? When you went to Chu, who stole the insect king for you to defend yourself? When you were homeless, who kindly took you in? You actually doubted me. Women are really terrible animals." When Tang Ning got up in the morning, his ears were still red. He just said something extra, and Su Mei tossed him around for most of the night, which made him extremely regretful for asking such a nonsense question. The first thing he did when he got up in the morning was not to wash up, but to write a letter. This was a letter to Emperor Chen. It was fine that the Prince of Qian colluded with the grassland, but he didn't expect that they even colluded with the western regions. He must remind Emperor Chen to make preparations early and strengthen the troops in Suzhou, Shazhou and other places. Once the grassland and the western regions launched a fierce attack at the same time, the northwest region would immediately ignite the flames of war. At that time, even the capital would not be a safe place. When Chen Zhou came in to clean up, he made the bed, put away a few fragrant hairs on the bed, walked to the window, opened the window, wiped off the footprints on the window sill, and then walked to Tang Ning and asked, "Does your excellency have any other instructions?" "You came just in time." Tang Ning put the secret letter he had just written into the envelope, sealed it, and said, "Send someone to rush this letter to the capital for 800 miles, and be sure to hand it over to your majesty in person." Chen Zhou saw his serious expression, took the envelope, and said seriously, "Yes." When Tang Ning walked out of the room, people came out from the rooms on both sides. Along the way, Lao Zheng and Gong Sunying had been living on his left and right sides, so there was no need to worry about safety issues. Old Zheng glanced at him and said, "Did you sleep well last night?" Based on their five senses, they would know that someone entered his room yesterday. Tang Ning was too lazy to explain and said, "Not bad." Gong Sunying glanced at him and said with a fake smile, "Lord Tang is really a romantic man. In this Jiangnan area, he actually has a lover." This woman used to be very frugal with words, but since she knew that the king of Jian had died, she has become more talkative and obviously a little too proud of herself. Tang Ning looked at her and said, "There is good news and bad news about the king of Jian. Which one do you want to hear first?" Speaking of the king of Jian, Gong Sunying was obviously nervous and asked, "What happened to the king of Jian?" "If you don't choose, then I will tell you the good news first." Tang Ning looked at her and said, "The good news is that the king of Jian is really dead." "Absolutely true, dead, and can't be deader." Gong Sunying looked at him and said vigilantly, "What about the bad news?" Tang Ning said, "The bad news is that the king of Jian is dead, and there is also the king of Jian's son. He can do what the king of Jian can do, so Baijin and others decided to support the son to restore the country. Your opponent is still there, so you were happy before." Gong Sunying's face changed drastically. At this moment, she realized that the king of Jian's son, who was still very young at the time, seemed to have been ignored by her. Tang Ning looked at her and asked, "How about it, do you want to do something?" Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 586. Chapter 583, The Wild Man. Tang Ning looked at Gong Sunying and asked her seductively if she wanted to do it. There should be many masters of Gu magic around Prince Jian. Tang Ning only knows a little about this and is not very good at it. As long as Gong Sunying is willing to help him wholeheartedly, he can avoid a lot of trouble. She once heard Su Mei say that Baijin and Gong Sunying were both the most outstanding disciples of the 10,000 Gu section since the catastrophe of the 10,000 Gu sect many years ago. Many advanced Gu techniques have been discontinued. In today's world, Gu techniques, there are not many people who can surpass the two of them. Gong Sunying looked at him and asked warily, "What are you doing?" The look in her eyes that looked like she was guarding against thieves made Tang Ning very uncomfortable. The Crown Prince of Guizhou was their common enemy. They were in the same boat, with the same goals and ideals. What did she need to guard against? Are you worried that you are plotting against her? Then she is really worrying too much. She is neither young nor beautiful, has a vicious heart, and is a domestic slave with 3 surnames. She is in the company of snakes, insects, rats and ants all day long. Most importantly, she is neither young nor beautiful. Tang Ning looked at her and said angrily, "Of course it's the Crown Prince of Guizhou. I have a suggestion. Tonight, you sneak into the Xiao mansion and kill the Crown Prince quietly. In this way, the Crown Prince of Guizhou is dead. It's gone. Baijin and the others have no one to support them. If they want to restore the country, they can only choose the King of Wu. Wouldn't it kill 2 birds with 1 stone and everyone would be happy?" Gong Sunying said without thinking, "The prince must have many masters around him, and my senior sister will also guard him. The assassination cannot be successful." Tang Ning thought for a while and said, "I can let Lao Zheng come with you." Gong Sunying was still unmoved and said, "The Xiao mansion is heavily guarded. It doesn't make any difference whether it's 1 person or 2 people. Do you know why Baijin is prospering in the capital, but you can only be locked up in the palace to squeeze out the remaining value?" Tang Ning looked at her with hatred, and said, "Because you have no courage." Gong Sunying's desire to sit on a mountain and watch tigers fight and reap the benefits of being a fisherman is really out of the blue. Tang Ning will let her know that being a fisherman is not that easy. But before that, he had to go to the governor's mansion to arrange the exams in Runzhou. When we arrived in Runzhou, dealing with the Xiao family was naturally the top priority, but the test of face also had to be carried out. In this matter, Tang Ning did not intend to act recklessly. As Gong Sunying said, the Xiao mansion was powerful. Tang Ning was not someone who did things regardless of the cost. The less she could lose, the less she would lose, especially when it was about human life. Both the Sharp Blade and Runzhou's defenders were real people, and as a Shangguan, Tang Ning needed to be responsible for them. The affairs of the governor's office must be completed as much as possible. Today, he also made an appointment with Su Mei to visit Runzhou City and ask her about some things. These things should have been asked last night, but unfortunately the content of the conversation between the two went off topic last night and they were never found again. Most of the good time in the evening was spent playing around. Su Mei looked radiant when she woke up in the morning, as if she was a different person, but Tang Ning didn't sleep well all night. He even wondered if she had used something to pick up yang and replenish yin on him while he was asleep. Methods. He and Lao Zheng walked out of the inn. Inside the Xiao mansion, Prince Jian stood in front of a courtyard gate and asked, "Why haven't you gotten up yet, girl?" The maid at the courtyard door looked at the closed courtyard door and said, "Girls never sleep well. There is no precise time for when to get up and when to rest." Prince Jian frowned, turned around and was about to leave, when he suddenly saw a person walking from the front. He looked at Su Mei, and after being stunned for a moment, he said in surprise, "You didn't sleep in the house last night." Su Mei looked radiant and even more charming. She glanced at him and asked, "Why, the prince has to take care of these things." After saying that, she flew lightly over the courtyard wall and disappeared into the courtyard. Prince Jian clenched his fists, looked at the two maids, and asked gloomily, "Where did she go last night?" The two maids immediately knelt down and said, "Your Majesty, please calm down. I really don't know where the girl went last night." The Crown Prince of Guizhou thought of how she looked so radiant just now, completely different from the past. As someone who has experienced it, he naturally knew when a woman would look like this. Thinking of this, his face turned completely gloomy, and he gritted his teeth and said, "Why are you pretending to be a white lotus that keeps strangers away from you in front of me, and go out to seduce wild men at night? In this case, I will not play with you anymore." He looked at the person next to him and said, "You are good at the art of concealment. When she goes out, follow her carefully. I want to see who that wild man is who dares to get ahead of me." The man bowed and said, "As you command." As soon as he finished speaking, a person came up behind him, looked at the Crown Prince of Guizhou, and said, "Your Majesty, the envoys from the grassland and the western regions have arrived." Prince Jian temporarily put away some of his thoughts and said, "Let's go." Xiao Mansion, a spacious hall. More than 10 people were divided into two obvious factions, occupying both sides of the main seat. The people on the left are tall and have prominent cheekbones, while the people on the right mostly have high nose bridges, distinct facial features, and are very exotic. Among them, a woman is the most eye-catching. Strangely, she is sitting among the people in the western regions. The person at the front is another Han-looking man. Several people on the left and right looked at each other with unfriendly eyes, full of hostility. A sturdy man looked at the opposite side, snorted coldly, and said in not very standard Chinese, "A small country in the western regions dares to have such thoughts. Hasn't it been beaten by the Central Plains?" The beautiful western regions woman tilted her head to look at him, smiled, and said in very standard Chinese, "Although the western regions is a small country, it was not beaten by the black barbarians like a stray dog and had to invade the Central Plains." The man was stunned, looked at the person next to him, and asked, "What does a stray dog mean?" The other person thought for a while and said, "The princess said that dog, seems to be a dog. She called us dogs." The man was immediately furious, stood up, and cursed, "You are the dog, you Westerners are all dogs, sons of dogs." The beautiful woman looked at him and asked with a smile, "Who are you calling a son of dogs?" The grassland man shouted, "The son of dogs scolded you." The beautiful woman covered her mouth and smiled, "Good son of dogs." The western regions heard the words and burst into laughter. The man was stunned for a moment, and after thinking for a long time, he finally understood what the western region woman meant. He was about to get angry, but after thinking again, he suddenly said, "I am a dog's son, and you are the mother of the dog's son, and you are a dog mother." The beautiful woman was stunned for a moment, and then she realized that the grassland barbarian had actually caught the loophole in her previous sentence, and used the way of dying together to scold her. She was so angry that her face was full of evil, and she picked up the teacup on the table and threw it over. The teacup hit the grassland man, and several people beside him stood up at once when they saw this. Several Western region people on the opposite side were not to be outdone, and they stood up one after another and confronted them from a distance. The atmosphere suddenly became tense and ready to explode. "What are you doing?" A voice came from outside, and the Prince of Chien walked in, looked at them, and said with a gloomy face, "You are fighting in your nest as soon as you meet, don't forget your mission on this trip." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 587. Remember it in 1 second and read wonderful novels for free without pop-ups. Please calm down for now. The Crown Prince of Kizhu looked at the people from the grasslands, then at the people from the western regions, and said, "Now we have a common enemy. I hope that the two parties can put aside their hatred for the time being and work together to deal with the outside world. If we are in chaos internally, how can we become a big deal?" After the Prince of Kizhu spoke out, the two groups gradually became quiet, but they still looked at each other with unkind eyes. Because of the terrain, the relationship between the western region and the grassland is not like that between the grassland and Chenchu. However, if they want to attack Chen State, the two parties will have conflicts of interest, and naturally they can't see each other. The Crown Prince of Kizhu looked at them and said, "The grassland and the Chen State are in the same situation. The western regions are not willing to surrender to the Chen State forever. If the three of us can join forces, under the attack from the north and the south, the Chen State will be attacked from both sides. This serious problem can be eliminated in one fell swoop. It is really a wise move for you to join forces with us." "Your Majesty, it's too early to say this." On the western region side, a middle-aged man who had been silent glanced at him and said, "I dare to ask your Majesty, what benefits can we get from helping you?" Although the people in the grassland did not speak, they looked at the Crown Prince of Kizhu. Obviously, this was an issue that concerned them all. Prince Jian shook his head and said, "It's not about helping me, but about cooperation. I admit that Xiaoan and Wanyan are very powerful now, but Xiaoan is not strong enough to compete with Chen. Wanyan is also restrained by Chu. Neither of us can deal with Chen alone." Prince Jian clapped his hands, and then two people took out a huge map and spread it on the ground. He pointed to one of the places on the map and said, "Xiaoan comes from the west and will soon occupy Shazhou, Suzhou, and Ganzhou. The army of the third prince will invade from the north, first occupy Fengzhou and then Shenzhou. The Chen state must send troops to the northwest and has no time to take care of the south of the Yangtze River. If we start another uprising in the south of the Yangtze River, the Chen state will collapse under the attack from the north and the south." The middle-aged man glanced at him and said, "The prince seems to have not reached the point yet." "Mr. Liu, there is no need to worry." Prince Jian smiled, pointed to a place on the map, and said, "When the Chen kingdom changes ownership, the two Shannon roads, the Jiangyi road, and the Duji road, these four roads can all be attributed to the western regions." He looked at the people on the grassland, pointed to another place, and said, "The 4 roads of Guanyi, Hedong, Henan, and Huainan will be given to the Wanyan tribe. When the time comes, the Chu kingdom will be surrounded and isolated, and the noble tribe will be rival." A prairie man knelt down and after counting, looked at him and asked, "We each have 4 lanes, you only want 2. Prince Jian smiled and said, "To show our sincerity, we only need 2. The man counted on his fingers again, patted his thigh and said, "Okay." Prince Jian looked at the middle-aged man and asked, "What do you think, Mr. Lu?" "Your Majesty, your calculations are really good." Mr. Lu gave him a meaningful look and said, "These 8 provinces with more than 100 states combined are probably not as good as the 2 provinces in the south of the Yangtze River. By then, all the south of the Central Plains will be your territory. And with Jiangnan in hand, money and food are constantly flowing. Do you think we are all fools?" Prince Jian's face looked a little unnatural, and he looked at him and asked, "Then what does Mr. Lu want?" Mr. Lu glanced at the map and said, "It's very simple. In addition to Shannon Road, Jiangyi Road, and Duji Road, we also need the 5 states of Ezhou, Yuezhou, Zhangzhou, Tanzhou, and Hangzhou." Prince Jian's expression changed and he said, "There are only 19 states in the Jiangnan West Road. You already have 4, and you want 5 more. Don't you think your appetite is too big, Mr. Lu?" Mr. Lu looked at him and asked, "Oh, Your Majesty, do you think we have a big appetite?" Prince Jian looked at Mr. Lu, who had a dull expression, and clenched his fists in his sleeves, then slowly released them. Not big a smile appeared on his face and he said, "Since Mr. Lu wants it, I will give you 5 more states." Mr. Lu was sure that Zioan could leave them, but they couldn't leave Zioan. Even if the other party opened his mouth, he had to endure it. When the restoration of the country is completed, he will get these 5 states back sooner or later. Seeing this, the grassland man immediately said, "They all have it, and we also want 5 states. The Jiangnan and Liangdao would have to lose at least 30% of their money and food if they went to the 10 states." Prince Jian sent greetings to all the 18 generations of their ancestors in his heart. Still with a smile on his face, he said, "To show our sincerity, the Jiangnan and Liangdao, each of the 5 states can be given to you." He looked at them with a smile and said, "Please tell the 3rd prince and the king to tell them to take action in time." Mr. Lu looked at him and said, "Zioan has been prepared for a long time. If something happens, he will march straight into it. On the prince's side, even the 4 major families in Runzhou can't do anything. It doesn't seem to be trustworthy." The meaning of the sentence was to ask them to prove their ability to start a rebellion first. Prince Jian glanced at him and said, "Under the general trend, the 4 small families can't hinder anything. Mr. Lu can just wait and see." Mr. Lu nodded and said, "That's very good." The 3 parties had their own thoughts. While they were discussing in the hall, in another courtyard of Xiao Mansion, Su Mei sat in front of the bronze mirror. She looked at it carefully for a while, then turned her head and looked at the maid behind her, and asked, "How is it, does the color of this lipstick match me? Does it look good?" The maid looked at her, with a trace of red cloud appearing on her face, and whispered, "This girl is so charming that she looks good with any kind of lipstick. Why are you talking sweetly like those stinky men?" Su Mei glanced at her, stood up, looked at herself up and down, and then walked out of the yard. The little maid looked at the other maid, covered her chest, blushed, and said, "The girl is so beautiful, even women can't help but like it." After Su Mei walked out of the courtyard, she went straight out of Xiao Mansion. Not long after, a figure also walked out of the door quietly. When Tang Ning and Lao Zhengchenzhou left the governor's mansion, they saw many people running forward in a hurry on the street, running and shouting something. "Hurry up, or the girl will leave. I have never seen such a beautiful girl in my entire life. There is such a beauty in the world. If I could kiss her, I would die immediately. Tang Ning looked up and looked ahead. Not far ahead was the place where he and Su Mei had made an appointment. Looking at the bustling crowd surging forward, he suddenly had an unpleasant premonition in his heart. In Runzhou, at the entrance of a certain restaurant, pedestrians, whether male or female, couldn't help but slow down when passing by the restaurant, looking at a figure at the door of the restaurant. It was a young woman, dressed in white, with a graceful figure. She just stood there casually, without making any movements, and could naturally attract the attention of people passing by. Once their eyes looked over, they would never let go. Move away. From time to time, there were sounds of pain, curses and quarrels in the street. These were disputes caused by pedestrians who accidentally collided with others when they were fascinated. There is no shortage of beauties in the south of the Yangtze River, but even a veteran who has experienced flowers for a long time has never seen such beauties that exude a charming charm from the inside out. Tang Ning stood not far away, looking at Su Mei, wondering whether to step forward. He knew that Su Mei was beautiful, naturally charming, and a natural nemesis of men. Even Tang Yaoyao, who was very competitive and wanted to compete with others, wholeheartedly admitted that Su Mei was prettier than her, but what he didn't know was that she could actually be more beautiful. After applying some light pink and white, Su Mei was not only the most beautiful woman in the capital, but she could also bear the title of world before the most beautiful woman. If he walks with her at this time, he will immediately become everyone's enemy. While Tang Ning was hesitating, Su Mei finally saw him. With a smile on her face, she waved to him and walked over quickly. She smiled, she smiled. When she smiles, she becomes even more beautiful. This girl should only exist in heaven. How many times can we see her in the human world? Who is that man? The beauty actually smiled at him. Why should he? When she realized that everyone's focus had shifted from Su Mei to him, Tang Ning's expression changed. Before the situation could be controlled, she quickly stepped forward, grabbed Su Mei's hand, and ran towards an alley next to the restaurant. What is he doing? How unreasonable, he actually dares to grab the beauty's hand. Unforgivable, simply unforgivable. In broad daylight, you robbed a beautiful woman, chased her down, and caught her before the official. The crowd gathered in an instant and rushed towards the alley. Old Zheng stood on the street, touched his knife, and praised, "It's natural to be charming, so damn beautiful." Chen Zhou looked at him, pointed at a person not far away, and asked, "Senior, do you think that person is a bit strange?" Lao Zheng glanced at the young man pointed by Chen Zhou and asked, "Why is it strange?" Chen Zhou said, "The way he looked at Miss Su was different from others. When the master took Miss Su away just now, his expression was also very strange." Lao Zheng looked at him, took a step back, kept a distance from him, shook his head and said, "You don't want to look at such a beautiful girl, but you actually look at a man." On the street, at the alley where Tang Ning and Su Mei disappeared, a young man walked over quickly and was about to enter the alley when he suddenly felt someone tapping him on the shoulder. He turned his head and was met with a blow from his hand. Then his vision went black and he lost consciousness. When he woke up again, he was already in a dark room. He was tied to a pillar with 5 flowered ropes. The rope on his body was tied in a strange way. There were 2 large holes on his chest, and there were also holes on his abdomen and ribs. The rope passed under his crotch and was tied from behind. Opposite him, a young man held a whip in his hand, looked at him with evil eyes, and said coldly, "Tell me, who are you?" Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 588. Chapter 585 of the main volume of Ruyi Little Man is here, on the streets of Runzhou, At a stall. Su Mei picked up a bun and placed it on the plate in front of Tang Ning. She blinked and said, crab roe soup buns are very famous in Runzhou. How do you like them? Even though Tang Ning had just gone to a jewelry store to buy a veil for her to cover her charming face, the two of them sitting at a street stall still attracted frequent glances from passers-by. Even the stall owner was complained a lot because he looked at her frequently and served the wrong dishes to the guests at other tables. Runzhou's steamed buns were different from those Tang Ning had eaten before. The skin was as thin as paper and could be broken by blowing a bomb. It tasted fresh but not greasy. Tang Ning ate 2 in a row, then looked at her and asked, "What are you doing, don't want to eat?" Su Mei held her chin with one hand, turned her head and looked at him, and said, "I'll watch you eat." Tang Ning didn't ask again. The more beautiful a woman is, the more she cares about her appearance and figure. Even Xiao Xiao knows that eating after the Wu period will make you gain weight easily. People like her who are harmful to the country and the people are probably more cruel to themselves. Tang Ning ate another bun, then looked at her and asked, "You are, a little different from before." For other women, there is a cruel fact that some people look better without makeup than they do with carefully dressed up. If they dress up carefully, they will immediately become seductive witches. Su Mei is such a witch. She is pretty enough without makeup. But when she puts makeup on, it will create the same effect as on the street. Su Mei glanced at him and asked, "What's the difference?" Tang Ning said truthfully, "She's even more beautiful than before." Su Mei raised her eyebrows and said, "Does that mean you weren't pretty before?" Tang Ning shook her head and said, "The beauty of the past was hibiscus growing out of clear water, naturally carved, it was natural beauty wearing colorful clothes, no makeup on the peach blossom face. Today's beauty is the hills overlap, the gold shines, and the clouds on the temples are lustrous, the cheeks are as fragrant as the snow, which means I am as beautiful as a rouge in the mirror, and as beautiful as a fairy overpowering all the flowers." Su Mei gave him a roll of her eyes and said, "Are you teasing your sister?" "I'm just telling the truth," Tang Ning said. "To be honest, I feel a lot of pressure walking with you. Next time, just dress up casually. Don't you know how beautiful you are?" Su Mei is pretty enough to begin with, but after dressing up, she will immediately become a disaster. When walking with her, she will naturally be involved. It's a lot of pressure for a man to be with her, and even more pressure for a woman to be with her. This is why Su Mei doesn't have many female friends in the capital. Just like Tang Ning herself doesn't want to be with someone who is better looking than him. Be friends, although there are not many such people. It was not clear what Su Mei's expression was under her veil, but her dark eyebrows were curved like distant mountains. She looked at Tang Ning with interest and said, "That's not what you said when we first met." Tang Ning smiled and said, "I was young at that time and didn't know how to appreciate." In fact, he didn't think Su Mei was not beautiful at that time, but they had no relationship at that time. Even if he complimented her on her beauty, she would not sleep in the same bed with him at night. He is flattering Su Mei now not because she is the most beautiful woman in the capital, but because she is his god sister, who shares a quilt with him and a pillow at night. "Why didn't I notice before that you are so good at making girls happy? No wonder you tricked them all into your home." Su Mei glanced at him and said, "Okay, let's get down to business. What are you going to do these days? Be careful, the prince already knows that the 3 strongholds of the Xiao family were destroyed by you, and may take action against you secretly." With old Zheng and Gong Sunying here, Tang Ning hoped that the Prince of Guizhou would take action quickly. His Highness might never have imagined that there was an undercover agent who was as beautiful as a fairy. Xiao Mansion. The people from the western region and the grassland have left, and only the Crown Prince of Guizhou and a few confidants are left in the hall. One person looked around, looked at Prince Jian, and said, "Your Highness, Bai Chongfeng is not here. Do you want someone to call her over?" "No need." Prince Jian waved his hand and said, She has been in the capital for too long and her courage is getting weaker and weaker. She will only drag us down. If she is gone, this prince will be able to be clean. He looked at everyone and asked, do you think the words of the people from the western regions and the grasslands are somewhat credible? If they pretend to cooperate, once we start an uprising in the south of the Yangtze River, they will not be able to contain Chengguo's military strength. We have been fighting for more than 10 years. Wouldn't the arrangement be ruined? The south of the Yangtze River is different from the north. If the western regions and the grasslands do not contain the Chen state and allow them to allocate their forces to suppress the rebellion, the imperial army will march straight in. Even if they win the south of the Yangtze River, they will not be able to hold it. One person thought for a while and said, the grassland has coveted Chengguo for a long time. If the third prince wants to inherit the position of Khan, he needs such a great achievement. Zioan is ambitious and is also unwilling to be a minister. This is not only our opportunities are also opportunities for them, and they should see this clearly. Prince Jian looked at him and said, don't be afraid of 10,000, just be afraid of what happens. The man said, 10,000 steps back, even if the situation changes, we can abandon Jiangnan and flee to central Guizhou. According to the current situation, within 5 years, the grassland and Chen state, the western regions and Chen state will definitely be divided. There will be a battle, and by that time, Chengguo will definitely have too much to take care of. If we wait for the opportunity to act, it is not too late to reap the benefits. The Prince of Qian pondered for a moment, clenched his fist and said, wealth and honor are sought in danger, the best is to start all over again. 5 years, this prince can still wait. The man continued, this uprising is a test for us from the grassland and the western regions. If we can get the help of the 4 major families, it will be easy to take over Jiangnan. Of course, we must try our best to win over the 4 major families. The Prince of Qian nodded and said, but before that, there is one more thing to do. A trace of murderous intent appeared on his face, and he said, the things of the Xiao family are not something that anyone can touch. The Prince of Qian looked at a gloomy old man beside him and said, Yan Gongfeng, please go to Runzhou post station tonight. It is difficult to make a move alone. It is impossible to fight against others on their territory without winning over a few reliable allies. Tang Ning has only a few people under him. He feels bad if he loses one of them, but he doesn't want to die in Jiangnan. The 3 major families in Runzhou have dominated Runzhou for hundreds of years and are deeply rooted in Jiangnan. They are very good targets for winning over. The reason why they are the 3 major families is that Tang Ning left the Su family to the Prince of Qian to win over. After all, the number 4 sounds unlucky. Removing the Su family will bring good luck. Besides, eating alone is not a good habit. If you eat meat yourself, you have to leave some soup for others. Bai family, Shen family, Song family. Tang Ning stood in the yard, muttered a few words, looked up at the sky, and sighed, it's a good time to be dark and windy. That night, the hour of Zhou had passed, and Runzhou city was silent. At the Runzhou post station, a figure suddenly appeared on a side of the courtyard wall. The figure was shrouded in a black robe, looked around, and quietly fell down the courtyard wall. In the courtyard, a sturdy figure who was dozing in the corner rubbed his sleepy eyes, raised his hand and greeted him, I'm here. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 589. The 713th chapter of the text of Ruyi Xiaolang Jun Tang Ning ignored Wan Yanyan until Yu defeated De Ji and everything was settled. He breathed a sigh of relief and patted his chest gently. Wan Yanyan looked at him and asked in surprise, what's wrong with you? Tang Ning looked at Ayuna and said unhappily, why were you so anxious just now? Ayuna asked in confusion, what's wrong with me? Tang Ning rubbed his eyebrows and said, you go up first. If they let De Ji go up, what will you do? Ayuna thought about it and sweat gradually seeped out of his forehead. If the third prince also played the same trick with them and used Daji to deal with her, it would not be so easy for Ayu to defeat Yi Shi, and in the end, they would still lose. Wang Yanyan also realized it, looked in the direction of the third prince, and whispered, "Why didn't the third brother let Daji go first?" Tang Ning said, "Because they are pigs like you. When your teammates are pigs, it is best to ensure that the opponents are also pigs, so as to remain undefeated." Whether Hanel and others were overwhelmed by anger or their brains were not enough, in short, they were able to win this game, all thanks to God's blessing. Hanel came over with a gloomy face and said, "You actually used such a despicable method. When did Yi become as shameless as the Han people?" Tang Ning glanced at him and said, "What despicable method? In the second match, wouldn't you let Daji go first?" Hanel looked at him with doubt on his face. Tang Ning knew that he didn't understand again, so he looked at Ayu and said, "Ayu, explain it to him." Ayu looked at Han Le and mumbled a few words. Han Le was stunned at first, and then he seemed to think of something and stood there, as if struck by lightning. He had already won the first game. Even if Daji lost to Aina in the second game, as long as Yishi won the third game, they still won 2 games. But he didn't think of this just now. Tang Ning looked at Ayu and said, "Tell him not to ride horses and shoot arrows all day, fighting and killing, and read more books, there is no harm." Ayu translated Tang Ning's words to him. Han Le stood in the yard, his face flushed and white. The third prince came over, looked at him, and asked, "What did they say to you just now?" Han Le came back to his senses, touched his head, and said, "No, nothing. The first game was a horse riding competition, and the second game was a shooting competition. The rules of archery are very simple. Just hit the target 20 feet away. There are divided areas on the target. The closer to the center of the target, the more points you get. The second game is not a best of 3 game, but 3 people each shoot 10 arrows. Finally, the total score is calculated, and the top 4 tribes will enter the third round of individual competition. Ayana and Ayu can only help him here. With Tang Ning's archery skills, it is no problem to hit the scar from 20 feet away, but to hit the center of the target, it depends on luck. Fortunately, Ayana's archery skills are extraordinary. Tang Ning has seen it a long time ago. During the female martial arts examination in the capital, she was one of the few people who scored full marks in archery. As for Ayu, you can guess how good her archery skills are from the fact that she carries a bow on her back all day. She and Ayana hit the center of the target with every arrow. Even if Tang Ning drags her feet, the total score is still ranked 3rd. As for the third competition, it will be held tomorrow. After the results came out, Aina looked at Tang Ning and said, "It's up to you next." There was only 1 day left before the next competition. Tonight, everyone was placed in the tent of the Wanyan tribe's main headquarters. Tang Ning sat in the tent, feeling a little irritated. He had been on the grassland for quite some time. Seeing that the year was already halfway through, this time next year would be the 3-year period he and Li Tianlan had agreed on. But until now, he had not heard from her. Even though no news was a good thing, he still couldn't help but worry. And things here at Wanyanyan were not going well. The eldest prince and the third prince used their own methods to shake her position in the tribe. If Tang Ning left, she would be eaten up in no time. Before she became the only person in power here, Tang Ning could not leave. But her rise was already very rapid. I'm afraid there will be a long period of stability next. She can wait, but Tang Ning can't. He had been out for so long, and he was already anxious. The night was long, he wanted to think of Zhong Yi, Su Ryu, Su Mei, and Tang Yao Yao, but he could only think of Wan Yan Yan. Wan Yan Yan walked in from outside the tent, looked at Tang Ning sitting on the bed in a daze, and whispered, "Do you miss home?" Tang Ning turned to look at her, sighed, and said, "You have to work hard, and strive to become the Khan as soon as possible. Wan Yan Yan lowered her head and said, "The Khan is not something I can become if I want to." "Forget it." Tang Ning knew that it was not good to force this matter on her, waved his hand, and when he looked at her again, he finally found something different, and said in surprise, "What you are wearing is..." Wan Yan Yan did not wear her national costume this time, but changed into a Han Chinese dress. Judging from the style of the clothes, it was not an ordinary women's dress. The customs of the Chen state were still somewhat conservative, and women would cover themselves tightly when they dressed. However, Wan Yanyan was wearing a Tang-style dress. The customs of the Tang dynasty were more open, and women's clothes were much more revealing than those of the Chen state, revealing their collarbones and the white area below them. This kind of clothing will undoubtedly attract more men's attention, so in Chen state, serious women will not wear it. It is either for the wife and husband to have fun in the boudoir at night, or it is a way for the women in the brothel to attract customers. Wan Yanyan's figure is not tall, but her proportions are very good. She is not as feminine as a Han woman, but more wild as a grassland woman. More importantly, her figure is actually very material, which completely holds up this dress. It was also the first time for Wan Yanyan to wear this kind of clothes. She looked at him and asked with a blushing face, "Why, does this dress look good?" Tang Ning did not go against her will, nodded and said, "It looks good." Wei Nianyun asked expectantly, "So, charming?" Tang Ning shook her head and said, "Not charming." Wei Nianyun said angrily, "How can that be considered charming?" Tang Ning could understand her. Girls have always longed to be charming when they grow up. This is human nature. Wan Yanyan may have awakened this attribute recently. Since she had nothing to do, Tang Ning waved to her and said, "Go get the comb and bring the rouge and gouache." Wan Yanyan didn't like beauty before, but ever since she went to Chu State, rouge and gouache never left her body. Tang Ning first helped her unravel the braids one by one, combed them smooth, then tied them up, combed her hair in a style that Su Mei usually wore, and applied rouge. When she looked at it again, she felt completely different from before. The rouge covered the youthfulness on her face, and the mature hairstyle covered up the last trace of childishness. She finally looked like a charming young woman in front of her. Wei Nianyun couldn't wait to ask, "Are you charming?" Tang Ning looked at her and warned her, don't laugh, hold on. Even if you smile, don't smile like that." Wei Nianyun suppressed her laughter and asked, "Do you think I was better before or now?" "Before." Tang Ning said without hesitation. "No matter how charming she is not as charming as Su Mei. Everyone has their own strengths. Although she is not as charming as Su Mei is not as wild as her. It is actually very stupid to blindly pursue the strengths of others and give up her own advantages." The smile on Wan Yanyan's face froze. After a while, she walked out of Tang Ning's tent and said angrily, "Go and catch the person named Chen." Tang Ning was lying on the bed, thinking about Wan Yanyan's appearance just now, and couldn't help but feel a little funny. Women want to please their looks. The little girl has finally grown up and knows how to dress herself up, but every man likes different types. That just now, in short, she should ask his sweetheart, not him. What's more, if you like someone, you will like everything about her, whether she is pure or charming, it is all her. The current Wei Nianyun clearly does not understand this truth. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 590. Runzhou Station, inside the woodshed. Gong Sun Ying looked at Yan Chongfeng, who was shamefully tied to the pillar, and said, "Senior brother Yan, those who know the current affairs are heroes. Now that the matter has come to this, you should tell me what the prince's plan is." "Bah," Yan Kongfeng spat hard and cursed angrily, "I thought you were just blind and followed the wrong master, but I didn't expect that you were actually blind and willing to become a lackey of the Chen Kingdom's court." Gong Sunying sighed and said, "Senior brothers and sisters, why do you do this? I don't have a junior sister like you." Yan Kongfeng looked at her and said coldly, "You must give up. Even if the person named Yan dies, he will not betray his master." "Okay, don't waste time." Tang Ning waved her hand, looked at Yan Chongfeng, and said, "You may want to talk or not. If you don't talk, forget it. Prince Jian of Liang Kingdom wants to win over the grassland and the western regions and take the opportunity to rebel. We know about things, but we pretend not to know. You." Seeing that their important and confidential matters were mentioned in such an understatement, Yan Kongfeng's face changed drastically and he said in a trembling voice, "You are simply talking nonsense." "Oh, it's all nonsense." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Then what happened to Prince Jian and his gang members, including those people from the grassland and the western regions, who are now in the Xiao family, is also a complete nonsense." Yan Kongfeng's body trembled and his face turned completely pale. Although he didn't say a word, they seemed to know everything, but they ignored it. Are they planning something? What I thought was a well thought out plan was exposed nakedly in front of others without even realizing it. How could it possibly succeed? Tang Ning looked at him and said, "If you don't say anything, we will wait to see Prince Jian's performance." Chen Zhou walked in from the outside, walked to Tang Ning, and whispered, "Sir, Miss Su is waiting for you outside." Tang Ning glanced at Yan Chongfeng, turned around and walked out. Yan Zhongfeng raised his head and inadvertently saw a beautiful figure flashing past the door. He was startled and blurted out, "Why is senior nephew Su here?" Gong Sunying glanced at him and said, "Senior brother Yan, you don't know yet, but junior nephew Su is the sister of Mr. Tang just now. Even though he is an official, he is closer than a real person." Junior sister Gong Sun, who was well aware of their methods, defected to the Chen court. Junior nephew Su, who knew all their actions, actually had such a close relationship with the enemy. After Yan Chongfeng was stunned for a moment, his heart finally collapsed, his facial features were distorted, and he lost his voice. "Traitors, you are all traitors. I have known for a long time that I shouldn't trust you women, I shouldn't trust you. Su Mei, the little traitor, came here to tell the truth." As expected, Prince Jian also wanted to win over the four major families, and the first one he chose was the Su family. However, this time, he met with disappointment at the Su family. It is reasonable for the Su family not to help the Crown Prince of Guizhou. As the largest family in the south of the Yangtze River, the life of the Su family is very prosperous. The family is powerful in the south of the Yangtze River and has backers in the court. If King Duan wins the battle for the rightful son, the Su family will have a very prosperous life. The status of the family will continue to rise. Under such circumstances, who would be so full that they would abandon all this and rebel with the Crown Prince of Guizhou? Once the rebellion fails, a century-old family will be completely wiped out. Unless it comes to a critical moment that threatens the family's survival, normal people cannot do such stupid things. The Su family has been standing in the south of the Yangtze River for hundreds of years and cannot fail to see this. There is another thing that makes Tang Ning strange. Prince Jian vows to disrupt Jiangnan. Who gave him the confidence? There are nearly 20 states in Jiangnan East Road alone. In an emergency, hundreds of thousands of troops can be gathered. How can he rebel with just a few buggers under his command? The Prince of Guizhou would not rebel just because of this, unless he was a fool. But being able to unite the western regions and the grassland to attack Chen from the three families shows that he still has some brains. Su Mei couldn't give an answer to this question, so she shook her head and said, "He doesn't trust me and my master, so he didn't tell us this." "Forget it if you don't know. You'll find out sooner or later." Tang Ning handed her a peeled banana and said, "You have to be careful around them. Don't come here for the next few days to avoid being discovered by them. I will take care of it." Su Mei took the banana, took a bite, looked at him and said, "Don't be so nice to me. A woman's heart is like a needle in the sea. It's inexplicable. Tang Ning doesn't know what's wrong with her. Is peeling a banana good for her?" He glanced at her and said, "We are a family. If I am not good to you, who should I be good to? Sister, not sister." Su Mei seemed to have remembered something troublesome, and said angrily, stood up, and said, "Forget it, I'm leaving." When she reached the door, she paused again, turned around and said, "Remember to leave a window open and a banana for me to eat at night. The bananas in Jiangnan are much more delicious than those in the capital." Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "I know." Yan Zhongfeng couldn't ask anything else, but Tang Ning still had two things to solve. The first thing is to figure out who Prince Jian relies on, know yourself and the enemy, and survive 100 battles. If you don't know his trump card, you will naturally have no countermeasures. Tang Ning looked at Gong Sunying and asked, "If you were the crown prince of Guizhou and wanted to rebel, what would you do?" Gong Sunying didn't even raise his head and said, "I've never rebelled, how do I know?" Tang Ning looked at her and said, "Look into my eyes and tell me again, have you ever rebelled?" Gong Sunying raised her head and said, "I." She said one word, and her voice froze as if she remembered something. In fact, Tang Ning had already gotten the answer she wanted when she asked this question. If Gong Sunying wanted to rebel, she would definitely use witchcraft to control local officials and generals from all sides. She really did so. The Prince of Qian was so sure that he could succeed in the rebellion, and I think he had some kind of firm support. Tang Ning looked at Gong Sunying and said, "There are still a dozen states in the east road of Jiangnan that we have not been to. I'll trouble you to go to each one of them." Gong Sunying obviously thought of something, and his face became solemn, and he said, "I'll go right away." The one who least wanted the Prince of Qian to succeed in the rebellion was not Chen Huang, but Gong Sunying. So Tang Ning was very relieved to hand over this task to her. Only she had the ability to see if the officials or garrisons of other states in the eastern part of Jiangnan were controlled by the Prince of Qian with poison. If so, she would help them to get rid of it and completely cut off the Prince of Qian. After Gong Sunying left, Lao Zheng looked at him and asked, "Aren't you afraid that she will be the last one to fish?" Lao Zheng's doubts were not unreasonable. The Prince of Qian could cast a poison, and Gong Sunying could also cast a poison. If she wanted to rebel, she could replace the Prince of Qian. She won't. Tang Ning shook her head and was not worried about it. The time for Gong Sunying has not come yet. All she can do now is to stop the Prince of Qian and prevent him from going ahead of her. Gong Sunying will definitely spare no effort in this matter. This matter has been resolved for the time being, and there is only one thing left in his mind. Tang Ning sighed and said, "So family, why don't you agree?" "Sir, if they don't agree, we can force them to agree." Chen Zhou stood behind him and whispered, "We can do this." After listening to him, Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Isn't this too insidious?" "Use insidious methods against insidious people." Chen Zhou looked at him and said, "The Su family has controlled Jiangnan for so long, and they have done more insidious things than this. Sir, this is to eliminate harm for the people." Tang Ning said with a gloomy face, "Do I look like someone who would do such an insidious thing?" "Sir, of course, I won't do such an insidious thing." Chen Zhou smiled and said, "I will arrange Lu Tong to do it." Tang Ning stood up, patted him on the shoulder, and said, "Chen Zhou, you are really a waste of talent as a lieutenant. This time when I go back, sir, I will ask His Majesty to give you a Lang Zhang." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 591. Chapter 588 of the main text volume of Ruyi. Little man is forced to go to the Su family in Liangshan. As the head of the four major families in Runzhou, the Su family is undoubtedly the head of the four major families in Jiangnan. There is a certain gap between the Bai, Shen, and Song families and the Su family. In the past decades or hundreds of years, the four families have fought openly and secretly for countless times. Even with the rapid rise of the Xiao family in recent years, they still have not replaced the Su family's position. At this time, everything in the Su family, which firmly occupied the position of the first family in Jiangnan, seemed to be normal, but in a certain hall, the atmosphere was a bit solemn. There were only two people in the spacious hall. The head of the Su family, Suje, sat on the main seat, rubbing his thumb and index finger gently, unable to place his mind. The Xiao family is actually the remnant of the Xiao family in the Liang kingdom. Another man walked slowly in the hall and murmured, "The Liang kingdom has been destroyed for a long time, and they still want to restore it, and they even informed us of this treasonous idea. Aren't they afraid that the Su family will tell the government?" "I'm afraid he is weak." Suje stood up and said, "In my opinion, I dare not talk about the whole of Jiangnan, but I am afraid that Jiangnan East Road has fallen into their hands. If not, he will never dare to tell us." "All of these?" The man looked at him and asked, "Brother, what do you mean? We want to help the person named Xiao." "Why should we help him?" Suje glanced at him and asked, "Today the Tang family is at its peak. Among the two princes, His Majesty is obviously more inclined to His Royal Highness Duan Wang. Whether it is power or wealth, the Su family only needs to wait. It only takes a few years. Why take such a risk?" "Brother means?" The middle-aged man looked at him and asked, "Shall we expose them to the government?" "No." Suje waved his hand and said, "Xiao is so confident that Runzhou must be under his control. Once he is angered, I'm afraid the Su family will be destroyed in his hands." The middle-aged man's face darkened. Although the Su family was the largest family in the south of the Yangtze River and could mobilize huge resources, it was still just a business family. There were only about 100 servants and guards, so it was impossible to go head-to-head with the well-prepared rebels. He said with a sullen face, "It doesn't matter if you help, or if you don't help, then what should the Su family do? Just wait and see what happens." Suje sat down again and said, "This move, whether advancing or retreating, carries huge risks. The best way is to not advance or retreat and just wait and see what happens." He looked out the window and said, "If the Xiao family fails, it will not affect our Su family. If he really succeeds and the Su family is not an enemy of him, he will not do too much. At most, he will suffer some losses. The family can still be preserved." The middle-aged man looked at him and asked tentatively, "Brother, do you think they might succeed?" "It's impossible for them alone." Suje breathed a long sigh of relief and said, "But there are still western regions and Jiangnan. If Chen State is attacked from both sides, it may really be impossible to survive. This possibility is not small. The Su family must not put all their efforts into it. All hopes are pinned on the Tang family and Prince Duan." The middle-aged man thought for a while and said, "I understand. If we wait and see what happens, the Su family can advance or retreat. No matter what happens in the future, they will not be forced to a dead end." Suje nodded and said, "Xiao's rebellion will definitely not let go of the capital official from the Ministry of Personnel. Even if he fails to rebel, if he can help us get rid of that person, we can save a lot of trouble for the capital." The middle-aged man thought for a while and said, "If they don't get rid of them, we can still set fire to the chaos. After all, the capital has given special care this time." Suje nodded and said, "You can arrange this matter." Before he finished speaking, a loud noise suddenly came from outside the room. Suje paused, looked outside, frowned and said, "What's going on?" In the courtyard of the Su family, dozens of figures wearing armor poured in from outside the door. The leader stood in the courtyard and shouted, "Who is the person in charge of the Su family?" A housekeeper ran over and asked, "I am the housekeeper of the Su mansion. I wonder if I have anything important to do." Lu Tong glanced at him and said, "The assassin who sneaked into the inn to kill my family yesterday escaped. We suspect that he hid in your Su mansion." He looked behind him, waved his hand and said, "Search for me." The steward took out a banknote from his sleeve and handed it to Lu Tong, and said hurriedly, "My lord, have you made a mistake? This is the Su mansion. How could the Su mansion harbor criminals?" Lu Tong put the banknotes in his arms, looked at him, and said angrily, "You dare to bribe me, brothers, there must be something wrong with the Su family, search carefully, search hard." The face of Su's housekeeper changed drastically. Suje walked out of the room, looked at Lu Tong, and asked, "Who are you? Do you have a search warrant from the government?" Lu Tong threw him the search warrant issued by the governor's office and said, "Assassinating an imperial official is a capital crime. Harboring a criminal will be punished with the same crime. What, do you want to stop me?" Suje looked at him and asked, "What if we want to stop him?" Clang. Lu Tong took out the long sword from his waist, pointed at him from a distance, and said, "Kill without mercy." At the same time as he made this move, two old men walked out from behind Fang Jie, staring at him intently. Being looked at by the two old men, Lu Tong felt like he was being stared at by two venomous snakes. He couldn't help but shudder. When he looked at the two people again, he smiled instead of angry and said loudly, "Brothers, listen up, the Su mansion is very likely to be harboring criminals, and if anyone dares to obstruct official business, they will be killed without mercy." "Wait a minute." Suje walked out, waved to the two old men behind him, and said, "If the Su family is harboring criminals, you will know after searching." "You know the truth." Lu Tong glanced at him, looked behind him, and said loudly, "Search for me." That was the second master's favorite vase, and they actually smashed it. The third lady's rosewood cabinet was also demolished by them. Who are these people? Has the Su family offended them? I don't care what I do. Su mansion. The servants stood in the yard, watching those people turn the entire Su family into a mess. The rare treasures placed outside by the Su family had been destroyed to an unknown extent, and everyone had a look of horror on their faces. They did it on purpose. The middle-aged man looked angry and couldn't help but take a step, but Suje reached out to stop him. He turned his head and said angrily, "Brother, do you want to watch them destroy the Su family?" Suje looked calm, rubbed his fingers again and again, and said, "Let's see what they want to do first. Su mansion, a messy room somewhere." Lu Tong looked at Chen Zhou and asked, "Old Chen, are there really criminals hiding here?" Chen Zhou waved his hand and said, "No one is guilty. These are just excuses made by adults." Lu Tong showed a puzzled expression on his face and said, "No one is guilty, why does the master torment the Su family so much? Has the Su family ever offended him?" "It is not the Su family that has offended my lord, but the Tang family of the capital." "But who allowed them to have anything to do with the Tang family?" Chen Zhou glanced at him and said, "It's not like you don't know about my lord's petty ways. You care about every detail and will retaliate." "Your Majesty, the feud with the Tang family is as deep as the sea, and the relationship between the Su family and the Tang family is so close. This time, I'm afraid I won't give up until the Su family is in turmoil." Lu Tong looked at him and asked, "What's going on?" Chen Zhou glanced out the window and said, "This is not easy. I come to the Su family to search for it once a day. I will wear a dragon robe and 2 phoenix crowns on that day. Just say that they were found from the Su family. In this way, the Su family, the label of rebellion cannot be taken off. We took the opportunity to capture all the Su family, escort them to the capital, confiscate their property, and hand it over to the treasury. Your Majesty asked Mr. Tang to come to Jiangnan this time just to make money. the Su family is so fu, will your majesty let it go? Even if the Tang family explains it to the Su family in court, for the sake of money, your majesty will turn a blind eye. Lu Tong glanced sideways out of the window, clapped his hands, and said with a smile, "Wonderful." Outside the window, a servant of the Su family was listening to the conversation inside. His legs were shaking and sweat was pouring from his forehead. When he heard footsteps coming from inside, he ran away. "What did you say?" The middle-aged man next to Sujia looked at a servant of the Su family, his expression changed wildly, he grabbed his collar and shouted loudly, "That's what they really said."